think of it as this is a great, great act of kindness. And so when you struggle with them, remind yourself, oh yeah, this is me being kind. I'm being kind to my future self.
You're listening to the Happy Doc Student Podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing clarity to the often mysterious doctoral process. Do you feel like you're losing your mind? Let me and my guests show you how to put more joy in your journey and graduate with your sanity, health, and relationships intact. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Frederick, and this is episode 71. In this show, I chat with Dr. Alison Miller. Alison received her PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Illinois, Chicago. She's an entrepreneur who has built 3 successful businesses from the ground up, most notably the Dissertation Coach. Founded in 2000, the Dissertation Coach has helped thousands of graduate students finish their doctoral dissertations and master's theses. Alison is the author of Finish Your Dissertation Once and for All: How to Overcome Psychological Barriers, Get Results, and Move On with Your Life, published in 2009 by the American Psychological Association. Her latest business endeavor, the Academic Writers Space, is an online community designed for academics to get real work done. Alison, welcome to the show.
Oh, so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I have been looking forward to this conversation because today you're going to talk to us about boundaries and productivity, and what an important concept, not just for a doctoral program, but life in general.
Yes, absolutely. Well, boundaries really is, if you look up the definition, it's a line that marks the limits of an area. So it's a dividing line. I've personally worked with a lot of graduate students and professors over the years. And one of the challenges when you're in academia is, hey, do you want to work on this project? It was like another opportunity. And so it's so easy to evaluate an opportunity like, yeah, I think I have time for that. But we're evaluating the opportunity in the context of itself, not in the context of everything. So, oftentimes people will say, I need to be better at time management. But actually what we really need to be better at is setting boundaries. You can't really manage time anyway. Time is indifferent to our efforts to manage it. It marches along, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, regardless of any effort we make to manage it. But what we can do is become better managers. This is really a key thing about our boundaries, that we are sovereign beings. We are pausing and choosing as opportunities and different endeavors come our way to think about, oh, I have to actually be a commitment manager. I'm the person who manages my commitments, my promises, and my agreements. And when something comes my way, I'm evaluating that in the context of my other roles and responsibilities. It's so essential. Well, there's all kinds of other boundaries we can talk about, but I think that's an essential way to think about boundaries is I am a commitment manager, not a time manager.
And this idea of we don't manage time is, I think, sometimes new to people. And I was just on a webinar last month with Mark Woods, who wrote Attack Your Day Before It Attacks You. And he brings up this idea of, just like you said, look, there's 24 hours in a day. You're not going to manage your time, but you're going to manage your activities. And one of the students who was on the call said, I get in the situation where, just the same word you used, opportunities. People are asking me if I want to be involved in these opportunities, and I have a hard time saying no because it sounds like such a great experience. So what kind of tips do you give people in terms of how do you make decisions about what you're going to commit to when you're in a doctoral program?
Yeah, it's absolutely challenging, and we don't want to disappoint people. And we really, generally, most of us have a real case of FOMO, the fear of missing out. The thing is, though, is that when the fear of missing out rules us, yeah, I don't want to miss that. It's going to be a great experience. I don't want to miss that. Then what ends up happening is we end up shortchanging the experiences that we already have committed to. So it's like the saying I often say, which is when you try to do everything, you end up doing nothing. So it's better to do something. You end up doing nothing really well is what I mean. It's, we can only do so many things. And the other really difficult thing for us particularly in the era that we're living in. When I went to graduate school, email was just getting started and it was DOS based. Like I didn't have internet in my house. I didn't have a smartphone. I didn't have streaming. I didn't have 24/7 news. And, I wasn't living in a world that had monetized my attention. So now we have to really realize is that we have to become kind of the emperor who is in charge. What are the real priorities? What are the things that do I want to leave graduate school, not only with obviously finishing my master's or dissertation? Do I want to publish? Do I want to get certain kinds of training? What are the things that when I leave this program, I really feel when I feel like I've accomplished, and what those priorities are so that other things are evaluated in that context. And the truth is, it's disappointing to have to say no to things. There's a discomfort and a fear of missing out. And if we allow the fear of missing out to take charge of us, we actually miss out on more because we miss out on the most important thing, which is you being present with your work, you and your resources, your intelligence, your abilities, your concentration and focus is surrendered over to working on something with more unified attention. And when we have too many things going on and really more than's humane, it's an invitation to be in a constant state of divided attention. And then you can't do anything well.
And Alison, you bring up such an important point of thinking about the future as a graduate student and where is this program that you're in? What step is it on this path to where you see yourself being? And if you take a moment and get very clear on that, it's easier to kind of sift through all these opportunities and go, that sounds interesting and I don't really want to say no, but let me remind myself of why I'm here and what I'm doing. And then it maybe is a little bit easier to say no.
Yeah. You just took me in what you were sharing. What you're saying is connecting with the sense of an internal compass, right? Like an inner North Star of, wait, I chose to take this time in my life to do a really difficult thing, get a graduate degree. I chose to engage with a project that is uncertain and ambiguous the entire time I'm engaging with it until it's done. That's uncomfortable. So in order for me to do that, what am I going to need? I only have so many resources. What resources are going to be allotted to that? And what's the other window dressing? The publications, the conferences, maybe you want to volunteer in an organization where you're doing some work or do some kind of practicum or internship, research experience, working for a particular PI. Maybe teaching is really important to you and you want to make sure that you get solid teaching experience. Depending on where you want to go, it's really important so that you can be clear upon what really is actually essential and what is extra. And do I really have time for that extra? Even though it'd be nice. And in the magical thinking world that we often live in, sure, I can work on that publication with you, but where in reality, where boots on the ground is that actually going to happen? And what's going to be the consequence to your primary projects if you take that on?
And one thing that I've also seen happen is the need to continually recalibrate. You may go into your program thinking you want to do one thing, and then as you get experience in that, realizing that didn't really spark joy the way I thought it was going to. And so constant reflection during the process is important too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have to be able to kind of reflect and navigate and change our minds. And many students that I've met thought they were going to be an academic, and then they got into academia and they looked around and were like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I want to do something else, And so what does that mean for you? But whatever you want to do, you have to actually finish the master's or the dissertation. You have to finish the thesis and recognizing that that is the central importance and putting that as the center of your academic work life so that more of your resources are available to it. It really is going to mean that you have to be conscious of boundaries. I mean, boundaries are really an essential element of working in a way that actually really does work. I mean, I feel like that's my life's mission now, is I want to support people to work in a way that actually really it works, right? You feel so satisfied at the end of the day with your progress And you also feel like the way that you were working was supportive of your well-being. And when we don't have boundaries, it's very easy where you might still be getting things done, but to feel kind of ravaged at the end of the day or the end of the week where there's just like nothing left. And if you're feeling like that ongoingly, by the way, it's often a sign that we have to figure out how to tighten up our boundaries for ourselves. Otherwise, we're actually being quite unkind to ourselves.
And that never leads anywhere good. Especially a high quality master's thesis or dissertation is not happening if that's your state. Alison, one of the things I was thinking before we hopped on the call was when I think about boundaries in doctoral programs, I see a lot of people, faculty and students, frankly, hesitate to say no. And so you have this interesting situation where you're highly competent. And so people know they can come to you to get the job done. And this may be outside of your academic life. You may have a friend asking you to look at a resume, someone else asking you to read a book and write a review. They know, here's Alison, she gets things done. So when you think about this boundary concept, how do you encourage people to say no to things they know they can do, but they just don't have time to do?
Mm-hmm. This is uncomfortable. To be of service to the projects that wants to get done, the project in a way is almost asking us to be a guardian, the guardian at the gate. And so one thing that can help us to think of it is like, I owe it to my future. I owe it to my dissertation. I owe it to whatever, to my well-being, to have boundaries. And that means having some uncomfortable adult conversations. So, usually it could sound something like, thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for considering me. Thank you for having trust in me. This is a great opportunity. And here's what I'm committed to. And one of the commitments I've made to myself is to not take on any new projects. I'm so sorry that I can't do it. It's that sense of self-respect of I'm saying no. And you know what? Here's the reality. That might be an uncomfortable conversation. The person might be upset or triggered, but only for a little while. Well, here's what happens. We tend to say yes to avoid the short-term discomfort of a conversation like I'm describing, but then we pay a long-term price, a long-term, and a very severe discomfort of being totally overwhelmed, stressed out, feeling so pressured, and not really having the time that we need to do something really essential, which is another aspect of boundaries, by the way, which is the boundaries around your work. That you recognize that to be someone who's really capable of performing well, just like an Olympic athlete, you would never have them train 18 hours a day. They need to stretch and rest and ice and get massage and nutrition, all these things. The recovery and the rejuvenation is such an essential part. The brain decompression that we need. For all of you out there listening who are in grad school during a global pandemic, I've been joking you should get a PhD plus. What a challenging context. And it's really, in a way, it's been a great opportunity for us to feel what it feels like to not be running around all the time, to be home more, to have somewhat less to do, and to realize, wow, the way that I've been living without boundaries, saying yes to everything, being constantly overwhelmed, constantly rushing, wow, my body doesn't like that. That is just now working for me. Working in a way that works means it's producing results. It's also working for you. It's working for your body, for your psyche, like for your well-being. So yeah, uncomfortable conversations, but short-term discomfort, or are you going to trade that for the long-term discomfort of having more to do than is humane to do?
And something that you brought up there that was just so profound to me was you can be productive by working, but then there's an end to that benefit when you're not saying yes to your well-being. And it really drives home this point of prioritizing saying yes to you and your goals and what works for you and being comfortable in saying yes to you.
Yes, it really does. It really, really does. It's so important. Heather, I want to mention something else about another way to think about boundaries that I think is important, because it's even to think about boundaries as boundaries with people, boundaries with projects, but also boundaries are really important in a given work session. So if I'm sitting down to work and I want to work on an aspect of my lit review, this is something for all of your listeners, something that you can do that's going to nourish your ability to be productive in a given period of time. You sit down, you've got 30 minutes. Do you know, actually 30 minutes, if we're working in a more boundaried way, even 20 minutes, even 15 minutes, when we're working in a really boundaried way, we can be quite potent and effective. And I want to encourage people to think about maybe the people who are going to be really, really successful in the future. It's not going to be as much about your ability as it's going to be about, can you work with unified attention? Because we're really struggling on this planet. We've become a planet of human beings, many of us who are constantly working with divided attention. So the fundamental boundary that I think is important, and how this is where the rubber meets the road and how work actually gets done, is that I pick small assignments. So I've already set the boundary. I'm narrowing down to, I'm only bowling at this lane. First of all, you can't bowl in more than one lane at a time, right? I'm only bowling in this lane. I'm boundarying off the rest of the lit review, my email, my phone, all the other millions of to-dos. This is why boundaries and trust are intimately connected, because I think cultivating a sense of trust that it's safe and okay to work on one thing at a time, to surrender your attention over to a small task. That's how work done. How does a dissertation get done anyway? It's really just a series of probably, who knows, maybe millions of tiny tasks, hundreds of thousands of them anyway. We just have to keep doing the next tiny task, the next tiny task, the next tiny task. And that's about working in a boundary way, where I learn to, I think of it as right before you're about to work, you take a deep breath and you draw your energy downward. Okay, what am I working on? Can I move my phone away from me? Close my email. And a key way to set boundaries, this is a practice people can engage in, this cultivation of working in like one lane, is right before you work, you write down what I am working on and what I am not working on. I am not on my phone. I am not in my email. I'm not in another Google Doc. I'm not reading another article. Like what the things that you know that you're vulnerable, that you're at risk of. For example, sometimes we'll go, I'm just going to check my text messages real quick. Well, the problem with that is that the phone has been designed for us to do more than that. And most of us have a tour of duty that we do through the phone on autopilot, right? So if you're going to pick up your phone, why am I picking up my phone? What am I here to do? What am I here to do? I'm not here for Instagram. I'm not here for Facebook or my bank account or my email. I'm here to see if my son texted me or, whatever it is. Being able to go into the phone in a more boundary way. So anyway, I'll summarize that by saying, knowing what you're going to do and what you're not going to do in a given work session, so that more of your resources, your presence, your attention, your abilities, etc., can be moved forward towards whatever it is you're working on, so much more efficient than constantly working in this boundaryless, divided attention way where the project is never really getting you. And that's why it's not progressing and moving forward.
And this divided attention has come up multiple times on different episodes. And I think back to the time I was getting my PhD, just like you, Alison, there were no cell phones. They didn't even exist, right? So when you went into the lab to write, you were not distracted. You knew why you were there, and there was nothing else to distract you. In today's day and age, we are constantly being pulled. And I think there was even this movement where being able to multitask was seen as a badge of honor, and people were, I can have 5 documents open and check my email. And what we're seeing, the research is coming out saying, staying in one lane, I love that visual. Staying in one lane is the way to go. And a challenge I have for all the listeners right now is try it. See what happens when you stay in one lane. And Alison, I believe you've got a writing community. And is this kind of a mechanism to help people stay in one lane?
Yes. So for the last 22 years, I've run a company called the Dissertation Coach that provides one-on-one coaching and consulting to graduate students, as well as other academic professionals and faculty. And then during the pandemic, we opened a new business called the Academic Writer Space, which is a co-working community. And so the way we work is we're we're on Zoom for a 2-hour writing retreat. We offer multiple during the week. And then we're together for 10 minutes as a community. And then people go off for 45 minutes in work. We come back for 10 minutes in the middle, do a second 45-minute round, and then a 10-minute close integration at the end. So because we have these captured 45-minute periods, that's often what we're asking people to do is think of it as it's 45 minutes. It's this boundaried time. What are you doing and what are you not doing? And so a frequent metaphor we use is this idea that you're going on a canoe trip. So when you're going on your canoe trip because you're working on your results chapter or you're reading literature or whatever you're doing, right before you go to work, you're saying to yourself, what's coming in the canoe with me and what am I leaving on the banks of the shore? And that clarity of these are being left behind. Now they're there. I can come back to them later, but I'm going to surrender and let go is something that we practice all the time. And it needs to be practiced over and over and over again. And the beautiful thing about learning to set boundaries and learning to work in this more surrendered way is that it's really a path of incredible growth for a human being, I believe, because you're having to start to listen to your body. Because your body is actually telling you and knocking on your door all the time, hey, we need some boundaries over here. The discomfort and the sensation and the anxiety and the pressure is like, hey, this way that you're working without boundaries, it doesn't feel good. So that's what we're doing in our co-working community is learning how to work in a more surrendered way with more unified attention, learning how each of us can discover our own path of working in a way that actually works. And I have yet to meet anyone where working in a completely unboundaried way with divided attention, it doesn't actually work. And our bodies, the tissues in our body, our organs, doesn't like it. And when we start to wake up and pay attention to that, we realize that by listening to those messages, they're actually guidance. Someone says to you, like we were talking about earlier on, hey, do you want to be involved in this project? And you feel like you have to say yes, but you can hear and you can feel something in you says, don't say yes to this, right? So starting to trust that intuition in you, the inner guidance that's actually always speaking to us, but we often, because we're so pressured and rushing and doing and without boundaries, we can't hear it. Being able to bring your energy down and listen, you'll realize that the boundaries are wanting to be set naturally. You already know what to say yes and no to. It's not really more complicated than learning how to listen. And that can take time.
I love that you bring in the somatic aspect. I know when I'm with doctoral students in support groups and we talk about that, they often have pressure in their chest, feelings of discomfort in their stomach. And what you say is so true. It's so simple. Sometimes I think people don't want to accept that things are so simple. You already know the answer. Your body's telling you. Are you willing to take a deep breath and listen?
Mm-hmm. Feel it. Let yourself let yourself feel it. It's a journey to learn for all of us to learn how to feel some of the stuff that goes on in our bodies that's incredibly uncomfortable to feel. But when you become someone who can feel and process and digest your own emotions, then you can receive the guidance in them. They're no longer in charge of you. They're not running your life for you, having you say, for example, yes to things that really your body knows you're a no.
And it fits right into this idea of a doctoral journey being a transformative journey. Yes, you're learning an entirely new skill set related to your field. You're creating this massive capstone project. But hey, while you're here, why don't you learn to get in touch with your intuition too, right? It's the perfect training ground.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. This experience is a great opportunity to expand and grow intellectually, emotionally, as a human being, in many ways, to become a more heart-centered person, a person who drops in and listens to what's the message from within and can feel more guided from within. I think it's actually really important because what we're talking about, the more of us that wake up in this way, this is how we transform the culture of academia.
Yes. And Alison, I want to talk just a little bit more about this writers community because some of the questions that I'm sure the listeners are wondering about are things like, Do you have to be in a specific field? Do you have to be in a specific part of your program? How do they get involved?
Sure. So you could be doing any kind of project. You don't have to be in a specific field. Right now, we have clients between Hawaii and Australia who are members of our community who come. It's basically a membership community. It's like an academic productivity gym. And our goal is to support people to work in a way that really works, in a way that's self-honoring, which is what we're talking about here with this embodiment piece. So right now, as of March 7th, we offer 22 2-hour Zoom-based writing retreats and 2 planning sessions every week, as well as some little extra things we do on a monthly basis. So it's a place for people to come who say, I really could use more community. I want to feel more accountable. I want more structure. I could use a container to help me. I'd like a place to practice developing skills like setting boundaries, like working with unified attention, like being more compassionate to myself, like knowing what to do when my inner critic and my imposter syndrome roar to the foreground. Like, what do I do when I'm procrastinating and I've struggled? Our community is about creating a container for people to actually show up and get real work done, like now in this session, now where you are, and also be learning an approach and a way of working that is sustainable over time, that's healthy for us, that people can take beyond. And right now, most of our members are in graduate school. We've had a lot of people finish their degrees and they just stay on because it's how they run their life now. They're postdocs or they're teaching, it's adjuncting, or got a tenure track position. So it's a combination of people in a really wide range of fields. And the thing that I love the most about the community is the way that it makes the private experience of doing academic work public in a way where you realize, wow, these private experiences I have, the difficulties I experience, they're universal and we can do something about them. We actually can grow and change. And so it's like a constant crowdsourcing of wisdom of how do I and how do we work in a way that actually works. It's just an ongoing inquiry. It isn't like there's like a set of truths we're teaching. It's really an ongoing inquiry. And we just have a lot of kind of core practices. I do want to say one thing about boundaries. This is not exactly connected, but I just want to make the point to our listeners. This is to me is the heart of the core practice in the academic writer space. And it's something you can take for yourself. There's always a version of you that shows up to work. You're irritable. You're in a great mood. You're tired. You're feeling really pressured and overwhelmed. You just want to get everything done simultaneously. You're just in whatever state you're in. Welcome. Then there's whatever you want to do, right? So if I'm working on editing this, okay, this is the task, and there's a version of me who's shown up. They may not be compatible. This is why having boundaries and having a narrower lane is helpful, because it quiets things down where when you go inward, the way we're talking about, what you're fundamentally doing is you're saying, who's here? What's the internal weather right now? What condition am I in? Oh, is that compatible with working on my lit review? Well, not really. Okay, well, what are my options then? Maybe I can really parse down what I said I was going to do into much more micro goals, because that's what the current version of me can handle. Or maybe I need to actually get up and go outside and get some fresh air. I need to stretch for a few minutes. I need some hot tea. I need to do a quick mini meditation. I need to be kind to myself. I need to settle myself down for a few minutes and not just tear into work in this state, because that's not conducive to actually getting what I want done. So paying attention to that. Boundaries help create a context in which there's an opening in which we can become aware and we can work on our compatibility. That's the central lever of influence that you have in your life. I don't like the word control, because I don't really think we have control, but we do have influence, and by paying attention to that compatibility. One last thing I'll say about the community is that anybody can do a free week of membership. We set it up so that people could come and see, is this something that would make a difference for me? So basically it's $99 a month. We offer 88 2-hour writing retreats and 8 planning sessions and a video library of pre-recorded retreats. So it's pretty incredible, the offering, and it is the kindest academic community I've ever been a part of. I'm so proud of how the members treat one another. So you could tell I'm so passionate about it because it's like I found my calling. I'm here to help people work in a way that works. And I really am so optimistic, no matter how much someone has struggled, no matter how severe their perfectionism or procrastination challenges seem, because a lot of people feel like they're brain damaged when they're in grad school, or like something's really, really wrong with them. There's nothing wrong. You just haven't learned how to work in a way that works.
And Alison, I'll make sure I have the link in the show notes below, but sometimes people will tell me they can't find the show notes. Do you want to say what your website is?
We're the academicwriterspace.com. So there's 2 S's in there, the academicwriterspace.com. Just check it out. If you have questions, when you go to the support page, there's an email. You can email and ask if you have any questions about the community or if you have trouble figuring out how to get started. But we'd love to have you. If you come, share that you're new, because it's one of the only times as an academic you'll ever get really welcomed somewhere.
I love that. There's so many things about the community that you just described that would be so motivating for someone in terms of accountability. I can't tell you how many times I've sat with a student who has really struggled and I say, let me see your calendar, and they don't block out that time. The community gives you a way to say yes to yourself again, right? It comes down to, I'm going to prioritize this. I'm going to show up during these hours, and the amount of work that you could get done in a 2-hour period, I think would be immediately inspiring, because you would sit down, you would get work done, and it would just reinforce this idea that you can do this. You can do this, and you don't have to do it alone.
Exactly.
Well, Alison, do you have maybe a favorite quote that you share with people who are going through the process, or some final words of wisdom that you want people to leave with?
Let me just say an important thing about boundaries in essence is that being someone who is conscious of the need for boundaries and practices and learns to set them is actually an act of reverence. You're being profoundly honoring and respectful of yourself and the human form that you live in. You're not a robot. You're not a machine. And so think of it as, this is a great, great act of kindness. And it's also very much having you be of service to the work you're doing, to set boundaries. And so when you struggle with them, remind yourself, oh yeah, this is me being kind. I'm being kind to my future self.
Alison, thank you so much for the work that you're doing to create a space for graduate students to bring their whole self into the picture and to normalize that. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Until then, I'm wishing you more joy in your journey. The Happy Doc Student Podcast is brought to you by expandyourhappy.com, and you can learn more there. Hey, one more thing. Just a quick reminder that the information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only.